P5 to P7, featuring
Mike.
Danny.
Margaret.
Jake.
P5, solving equations numerically and algebraically.
Lesson P5.
Having trouble solving equations, Danny?
Yes, Mr. Schmid.
Well, follow these easy 5 steps.
Step number 1, factor. Step number 2, square root. Step number 3, complete the square. Step number 4, quadratic formula. Step number 5, graph.
Mr. Schmid, how do you factor?
We take a look at this problem. X squared plus 3x minus 18. You first have to set the problem equal to 0. Then you take a look at 3x and the 18. You find the multiples of 18 and add them up to 3, which we have done here. X plus 6 and x minus 3. You then set each of the factored problems equal to 0. X plus 6 equals 0 and x minus 3 equals 0. You then get x equals negative 6 and x equals 3.
Golly gee, Mr. Schmid, thanks a lot. But what if there's a square root, Mrs. Warham?
Take x squared equals 4. Now square both sides. You'll get x equals 2, but since there's a square root, you have to do plus or minus 2.
Oh, sweet, that really cleared things up.
Danny?
My friends always talk about completing the square. What's that all about?
Well, Danny, the first thing you do in completing a square is make sure that all numbers without a variable gets moved to the other side. Then you take the middle term, which is a 6 here, and divide it by 2, and take the square of that, which is 9. You then add that to the other side too. Next you take you factor this side and add this side up, and then take the square root of both sides. Then you minus 3 from this side, and eventually you get x equals negative 3 plus or minus square root of 14.
Yes, Danny.
But what if all those other options don't work?
Well, Danny, we can use the quadratic formula. If you look at the standard form of an equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, and you can't use factoring, square roots, or completing the square, we can use the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
Wait, so I can use that for everything?
Yes, isn't that amazing?
Truly amazing, Mr. Schmid. So for Christmas I got a present, and it's the TI-84 Plus C Silver Edition.
No way.
Yeah. Can I use it for solving equations?
Yes.
Nice, me and my friends understand P5 now.
P6, complex numbers.
Mr. Ciascio, what are imaginary numbers?
You get imaginary numbers when you have a negative square root. We give that term the letter I as a variable. For imaginary numbers, this is the standard form. Negative a plus bi. I squared equals negative 1, I to the third equals negative I, and I to the fourth equals 1.
I've learned so much about equations these past couple days.
Yeah, you've learned about all the 5 steps.
I just have one more question.
What's that?
What's a conjugate?
The conjugate is the opposite of the denominator. The purpose of the conjugate is to get rid of all the i's in the denominator. So here we have the conjugate getting multiplied by the top and the bottom. Then you FOIL it out and you get this. Make sure I squared is simplified to negative 1 so you get rid of the I squareds. Next you have negative 6 plus 43i over 29, but you have to get in standard form, which is negative a plus b, I. So you have negative 6 over 29 plus 43i over 29.
Before ending P6, Danny, we have to talk about the discriminant of an equation. The discriminant of the quadratic equation is just the square root part of the equation, which is the square root of b squared minus 4ac. We can use this part of an equation to find information about the solution. If the discriminant is greater than 0, we have 2 solutions. If the discriminant is equal to 0, we have 1 solution. If the discriminant is less than 0, we have what's called a complex solution.
P6 is over. We're done, right?
No!
We still have P7 left. Solving inequalities algebraically and graphically.
Did you know you can solve an equation algebraically and graphically? Well, you can. Like I said, there's two ways to solve an equation. First, you can solve it algebraically. The first thing you would do is set it to 0, and then you would solve for the equation. After you solve, you would then test the points on both sides to determine the intervals. The next way you can solve the equation would be graphically. First, you would graph to find the x interval. Then you determine the intervals for which the graph lies above or below the x-axis, depending on if it's greater than or less than.
So are we done with the chapter now, Mr. Schmidt?
Yeah, are you ready to take your test?
I'm very ready.
Sweet.